Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the most anticipated new Shadow Pokemon in Pokemon Go, Shadow Alolan Muk. Now prior to having a Shadow, Alolan Muk saw basically no play in the Great League, but according to PvPoke simulations, it looks like the Shadow on Alolan Muk can help it pick up a ton of extra matchups. So I wanted to test it out in some practice battles with members of my Discord to see if it's worth the hype and worth the investment. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Shadow Alolan Muk in action in the Great League. Hopping to the first match, picking up a pretty decent lead Medicham into Shadow Dragonair. Shadow Dragonair is going to strike first, going for the body slam right off the bat. I will commit an early shield and then return fire with the Ice Punch, but my opponent makes a beautiful catch, catching the Ice Punch onto the Lantern. That is absolutely tragic for me. I would have loved that Ice Punch later in the game to threaten the Dragonair, but unfortunately no such luck. I only have one shield remaining. I am not using it here. Opponent goes for the Surf. I'm going to farm up and force the CMP tie on Surf number 2 as I fire off the Psychic. Psychic is going to get the shield. They're stuck through on the Surf. This is going to KO the Medicham. And now I'm going to send in Drapion. I only have one shield remaining. I'm definitely going to be saving it for the Shadow Alolan Muk. Unfortunately, since I am a regular Drapion here, this crunch is not going to be enough to KO. I thought about the Shadow, but I decided that I wanted the regular for slightly more bulk, since Shadow Alolan Muk isn't the tankiest Pokemon ever. I'm going to bank the Aqua Tail, send in Shadow Alolan Muk, and get the farm down. Now I have an energy lead. I can outpace the Dragonair to an Acid Spray. In comes the Dragonair, farming up. I make it to the Acid Spray, but they switch and catch onto Noctowl. Noctowl, this is going to be interesting. One of the best meta Pokemon. Let's see how Shadow Alolan Muk can do here. Noctowl is going to fire off the Sky Attack. I will commit my final shield. I'm going to build up to the Dark Pulse and then go for the Acid Spray. At this point, they have to respect this damage. Acid Spray is going to get shielded. These poison jabs tearing through the Noctowl, and they're forced to fire off a move. This Sky Attack is going to KO. I banked an Aqua Tail earlier, so all I have to do on the Drapion is farm up to the back-to-back Aqua Tails. Dragonair is incredibly close to a move, but they don't quite have it yet. In comes the Dragonair, and we have the Aqua Tail. This is resistant damage, but it takes care of the Dragonair and secures the win. Moving into the next match, leading Medicham into Swampert. Considering I have two poison types in the back, I am very happy to catch the Swampert on the lead. I'm going to overfarm here by 1 and CMP tie the Psychic as they reach the back-to-back Hydro Cannons. Hydro Cannon number 1 is going to land, and I'm going to be returning fire here with the Psychic, hoping my opponent decides to call the bait. Psychic lands and KOs the Swampert. In comes Pidgeot. I'm now going to pivot into Drapion. In case they have a secondary counter to a Dark Poison type in the back, I need to bait it out. Crunch is going to land. That deals so much damage. And at this point, honestly, even if they Brave Bird, I'm just going to let it through. Opponent baits with a Feather Dance, and this is even better. I can fire off the Crunch even at -2. This will do quite a lot of damage. Opponent is going to commit the shield. And here, again, I'm just going to call the Feather Dance. If they Brave Bird, that's fine. But they go for a Feather Dance. It's not enough to KO. And I'm going for another Crunch. This Crunch is not going to be enough to KO. But my Switch Clock is up. In comes the Shadow Alolan Muk. And I'm able to farm down. In the back, the opponent is running Noctowl. And I am not baiting. I'm going straight for the Dark Pulse here. Do they respect it? They do not! Dark Pulse does so much damage to the Noctowl. I wanted to see, does the Sky Attack KO from here? It comes very close. So Shadow Alolan Muk, definitely a glassy pick, but it can output a lot of damage. And that Poison Jab and Acid Spray combination is incredibly deadly. Opponent is going to KO with the Sky Attack. One counter from Medicham will secure the victory. Slightly negative lead in the next match, Medicham into Noctowl. I'm going to save switch into Drapion. Drapion farming up, and since they're staying in, I'm going to go for the Crunch. I'll look for a potential debuff and get some chip damage. Crunch is going to land. We do not see a debuff. That is unfortunate. Opponent is going to return fire here with the Sky Attack. Sky Attack is going to land. Drapion able to survive, and I overfarm to win CMP with the Crunch as the Noctowl reaches Sky Attack number 2. That is not going to be enough to KO. I have a tough decision to make. Do I play for Switch? I decide against it. I'm going to let this go and instead use this as an opportunity to get an energy lead on my Shadow Alolan Muk. We'll have to see what does my opponent have in the back here for the Muk, and they have a Registeel. I send in Medicham, and it's a Trevenant in the back. and I definitely should have fought for switch advantage, as this is an absolutely awful situation to be in. Ice Punch is going to land. I'm going to farm up. My opponent is going to throw on the CMP tie as I make it to the Ice Punch. They should just go straight Shadow Ball here, and they do. Opponent is making the right read, and in this moment, I basically just have to save my shields for the charge moves from the Registeel. They fire off the Shadow Ball. That does a lot of resisted damage. Shadow Alolan Muk is now going to have to try and slay a Registeel. I'm firing off the Dark Pulse right off the bat. Dark Pulse is going to land, dealing some solid damage, and now I'm going to bait with the Acid Spray. I'm hoping my opponent is going to shield here, and they do, but my health is rapidly dwindling on the Muk. Things looking quite dire. They go for the Zap Cannon here. Zap Cannon gets shielded and does debuff my attack. I'm farming up as much as I can. I'm going for another Acid Spray bait. This is my only hope. I have to make it to a Dark Pulse to get the KO. I get the shield. It's a CMP tie, and this is going to be close. I commit the shield. It's another Zap Cannon, but I die with the move. Hopping into the next match, leading Medicham into Shadow Alolan Ninetales. They're running Powder Snow, but I'm still going to switch out of here. In comes the Drapion, and I'm just going to keep over farming until they hopefully switch out. Weather Ball is going to land. I continue to farm. Opponent sends in Swampert, and I'm going to fire off the Crunch here. This is a Shadow Swampert, so Crunch will two-shot, and here I just make a bad mistake. I should have gone for the Crunch to guarantee either switch or a shield, but I go for an Aqua Tail bait for no good reason whatsoever. Opponent calls it, and now I can't win switch. That's a bit unfortunate, but the good news is I was still able to bait out that Shadow Swampert, which is what I had to do. In comes the Medicham. Medicham is able to get the farm down. In comes the Ninetales, and look at the Poison Jabs. Poison Jabs absolutely tearing through the Shadow Alolan Ninetales. Ninetales has a ton of energy. They full send the Dazzling Gleam, and in the back is Hawlucha. And Hawlucha is about to feel the full force of Shadow Alolan Muk. Look at the Poison Jabs after the Acid Spray. This combination is incredibly deadly. Acid Spray number 2 is going to be shielded. Hawlucha cannot make it to the back-to-back moves. I can comfortably shield the Flying Press and then just farm down the Ninetales, and that is a good game. Dream lead in the next match, Medicham into Obstagoon. Opponent is going to be safe switching into Altaria, and honestly, I don't have a hard check to an Altaria safe switch. So I'm going to get some chip with the Ice Punch and then send in Drapion. Drapion should be able to tank whatever the Altaria throws here. They do have quite a bit of energy. I'm going to let this through. Altaria is going to full send the Moonblast. That does a lot of damage. If they want, they can take switch advantage, but they would have to give up both shields to do so. I fire off the Crunch. Opponent decides not to go for switch, and instead, they're just going to look for farm on the Obstagoon. I could throw an Aqua Tail here, but I'm actually going to go for the Resisted Crunch, just in case I do get the potential debuff. Crunch lands, no debuff, I do get farmed down. Since our timers are misaligned, I am going to wait my clock here, send back in the Medicham, and we'll see what they have in the back, and it's a Trevenant. That is very unfortunate for my opponent. And let's see how much damage this does. I'm going to let this through. They go for the Seed Bomb, and that honestly does quite a lot of damage. As I mentioned, the damage output from this thing is awesome, but it is incredibly frail. I'm able to fire off the Acid Spray here, and now that I've debuffed them, it's a very comfortable farm down. They go for the Seed Bomb, I get the farm down, and I leave with another Acid Spray here. Obstagoon not having a particularly good day. Obstagoon is going to look for the farm down. These Poison Jabs are tearing through, and one counter from Medicham is going to mean game over. I tank whatever they throw, just a Night Slash, and that's a good game. Tough lead in the next match, Medicham into Defense Deoxys. I do have 2 better responses in the back, so I am going to save switch into Drapion, and my opponent is not switching out here. This hopefully tells me that they don't have a good answer to a Dark Poison in the back, and if that's the case, then my Shadow Alolan Muk should be able to put in a lot of work here. Deoxys is going to fire off a charge move. They go for the Rock Slide. That is not going to be enough to KO. Drapion farming up and firing off the Crunch. This will be lethal. Opponent is going to commit the shield, so they are making a play for switch advantage. They end up losing CMP on the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to get the Drapion low, and here I have a decision. Do I take my shields or do I go for switch? I'm going to take my shields because if they didn't switch something in, I'm hoping they don't have a good counter in the back, but unfortunately they do. Opponent read the team, and now I'm honestly in a pretty tough spot. I do have Medicham up a shield here, but this is still not a comfortable spot to be in whatsoever. I will commit the shield, as I do need to protect myself from all possible sky attacks. I'm going to farm up and again win CMP over the Noctowl. I just have to hope that my clock will be up in time to catch the third sky attack. I will be committing the final shield here. This is going to be close. My clock is a few seconds from up. My clock does not come up in time, and I'm forced to fire off the Ice Punch on the CMP tie. Aggressive switch into the Muk, trying to outpace the Stunfisk here. Muk barely cannot by a single turn. Earthquake is going to KO, and as you can see, Alolan Muk can output quite a bit of damage against a lot of things, but it is just absolutely helpless against any ground type, and most steel types as well. I fire off the Psychic, it's not going to be enough to KO. Galarian Stunfisk KOs with the Earthquake, and that is a good game. Noctowl returns in the next match, but this time on the lead. I'm going to save switch into Drapion. My opponent not switching out, so I'm going to go for the Crunch right off the bat, hoping for a potential defense drop. Crunch does not give the defense drop. You hate to see it. Opponent is firing off the Sky Attack here. Sky Attack not going to be lethal, so I am going to let this through. But the unfortunate thing is that since I did not get the debuff, this Crunch is not going to be lethal either. I fire off the Crunch. Noctowl is able to survive. I go for the Aqua Tail, but my opponent makes a crazy catch, catching the Aqua Tail onto Trevenant, and Trevenant is going to get the farm down. Bad news for the Trevenant, however, is I have the Shadow Alolan Muk. Alolan Muk, these poison jabs adding up quite a bit, but the Shadow Ball is going to hurt. Shadow Ball, big damage onto the Shadow Alolan Muk. As I mentioned, this thing is definitely not the tankiest. I will commit the shield here, as I want to keep the energy that I have. We'll have to see, are they going to send in the Owl, or do we see the third here? Opponent, they're thinking about it. They send in the Lantern, and it's a Water Gun Lantern. I'm going to fire off the Acid Spray here. They're going to call it. Nicely done. And now I'm going for the Dark Pulse. They're debuffed, so odds are they're probably going to be shielding this one, and they will. In comes the Medicham. Thanks to the Acid Spray debuff, these counters are shredding. In comes the Noctowl, and it has loaded energy. I will commit the shield on the Sky Attack. Medicham gets the farm down. I leave with so much HP, and now my only loose con is going for a bait. So I am going to full send the Psychic here. Psychic gets called, and that's game over. Picking up a great lead in the next match, Medicham into Galarian Stunfisk. My opponent is going to save switch into Sableye, and I'm going to send in my Shadow Alolan Muk. Opponent does not build up to the return here, so I don't have to respect this. Opponent is probably recognizing that 2 foul plays are going to be enough to KO. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Dark Pulse. Shadow Alolan Muk can win the 2-shield straight Acid Spray unless the opponent double baits, but in this case, I did overfarm, so I decided to full send the Dark Pulse, and unfortunately, that does get shielded. I really don't want to lose switch here. I farm up, and I end up losing CMP. A definite misplay by me. I lost track of Sableye's energy, and that cost me a shield. I'm going to fire off the Dark Pulse. Opponent is taking their shield advantage. Let's see, are they going to be sending in the Stunfisk? Almost assuredly they will. Stunfisk looking for a massive farm down. They're going to have to tank a Dark Pulse, but this is a move that Stunfisk is able to survive. Dark Pulse is going to land. Stunfisk able to tank it. I'm going to send in the Medicham, but Medicham will be greeted by a loaded Earthquake from the Galarian Stunfisk. Earthquake is going to land in the back. Opponent has Noctowl, and Noctowl with a shield advantage is just incredibly deadly. Noctowl is going to fire off the Sky Attack. My only hope is that I can force the CMP tie. If my opponent plays this correctly, I should have no win con remaining in this match. They do shield up the Crunch. Unfortunately, I do not get the debuff here. I'm firing off another move. This Crunch is going to land. My opponent over farming absolutely perfectly, and the game unfortunately is going to be over. They over farmed enough. They can outpace the Medicham. Sky Attack is going to be taking care of my Medi, and that's game over. We've got some spice in the final match. Medicham into Lurantis. I'm going to save switch into Drapion. I do want to check and see if they have a counter to a Dark Poison type in the back. Lurantis is going to launch the superpower. That does quite a bit of damage. And in comes a Shadow Poliwrath. Unfortunately, I am not running Sludge Bomb here. I go for the Crunch. That's going to land, and we finally see a defense drop at long last. I'm going for Crunch number 2. That's going to get them extremely low. Opponent is going to be forced to fire off a charge move here, as I believe I would have been able to make it to the Aqua Tail. They go for the Scald on the Poliwrath. Definitely happy to see the Poliwrath out of the way, as that should hopefully clear a path for Shadow Alolan Muk in the endgame. Back in comes Lurantis. Lurantis will be met with the Ice Punch. This is non-lethal, but it will do a lot. Opponent lets it through. Lurantis is going to be firing off a Leaf Blade here, and now I have 2 shield Shadow Alolan Muk versus the world. In the back, opponent running Samurott. They're running a triple Spice team. And I included this battle as a good showcase of what can happen if your opponent is running a Pokemon that does not have a lot of bulk to it. The Poison Jabs, even before an Acid Spray, just shred through the Samurott, and look after. Oh my goodness, Samurott just gets melted, and that's game over. All in all, Shadow Alolan Muk definitely feels like a sizable upgrade compared to the regular. I'll be honest, the regular, in my view, has 0 play in the Open Great League, but with the Shadow, it legitimately has some play. That Poison Jab Acid Spray combination is absolutely deadly, and if shield's down, Shadow Dark Pulse hits incredibly hard. The counterbalance to that, of course, is now that it's Shadow, it is taking a lot more damage, and Alolan Muk already was not the tankiest Pokemon in the Great League to begin with, so I think it's an off-meta Pokemon that you could find some success with, but overall, it feels like the main core meta is going to be largely unbothered by this pick. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.